say that I think that this idea, I'm really glad to be here. I think that the whole idea of teal around the world is really, it's a really interesting concept, the way in which the content, the way in which the content's being packaged, the community. I'm really very happy to be part of this. Um, and what I'd like to do is to, as Romina has suggested, take you through the example of one particular organization, which I think is interesting, remarkably interesting. In fact, when Romina asked the question of who's influenced you the most, I think that the CEO of Hire, honorary CEO now, by the name of John Raymond, has probably been the person who has influenced me the most in the way in which I think about organizational transformation. And you'll see why in a minute. I should also say that I have a consulting relationship with them. So I'm hoping that this is completely objective. I try to be completely objective. I pride myself in being completely objective. I often tell them what they don't want to hear, and I'll tell you the same thing. But I should tell you so that you understand that in advance. Let me. I'm going to go to my slides, and I will leave the slides at the first sign of anyone having a question of that, because I think the slides are, that's a better way to do this thing. But they're efficient. What I think led Ray to ask me to be involved in this is the scale and the duration of which Hire has been involved in its transformation. So what I think, the way I think about them is that, look, they're large, they're successful, they're a market incumbent leader. And so all of those things almost always suggest that they'll be resistant to change, and they're in an old economy industry, home appliances. So all of those things sort of stack the odds against incentives to change the organization in any way. That's why disruption is almost always so brutal when it comes to old economy industries. One of the ways that Hires differs, however, from other organizations I see, is that they are not interested in operational excellence per se. Okay, it's not that they're disinterested in operational excellence, but that's not their objective. They're not trying to get into a price war. They want to be able to compete by having a better customer experience. And they also believe that the way to do that is with the entrepreneurial energies and tacit knowledge that are latent in their organizations. If only they can, unleash them in some way. So this is much more about variance enlargement than variance reduction. I think organizations in mature industries try to take all the surprises out so they can get the costs as low as they can. Efficiency becomes the battle cry. Hire is really about putting the surprises back in so that they can compete by being able to be ahead of the curve rather than struggling to keep up with the curve. And that's what originally captured my interest in them. I was doing a lot of stuff in operations management at the time, and I thought this is different than anything I've heard. So that was, I first heard about Hire in 1984. I was living in China. We'll talk a little bit about what they did, but they made a splash. Everybody in China heard about what Hire was doing, and I was one of those people. Then in 1997, I moved back to China, and I had the opportunity to meet, to speak to the managing board of Hire. And I was the president of a business school. They invited me up, and it was a really interesting opportunity to hear firsthand what they were doing. And ever since then, I've been a fan of their transformation experiences. In 1984, they were nearly bankrupt. And what happened was that the newly appointed director general, if you will, or managing director is a better term, managing director of Hire, who had moved from a government position to taking over this moribund state-supported enterprise, discovered that about 20% of their finished goods inventory was unworkable, didn't work. Um, Most people that I knew in China said at that point said, who cares? You know, better to have a refrigerator that doesn't work than one that does. We can always fix the one that doesn't work. If we can't get a refrigerator, we're out of luck. So, but Jiang Wei-min, the then managing director, said, look, we are very early, about 4 years into the reforms that Deng Xiaoping has authored. If those reforms lead to where we hope to go, quality is going to matter. Brand's going to matter. So we need to start right now thinking about how do we make a good quality product so that we can put our brand on it. And so he took 76 refrigerators, a significant part of their finished goods inventory, moved them out in the street, bought 76 sledgehammers, and took 76 of the workers on the line who had built those refrigerators and told them to destroy those refrigerators. That's a vivid message that things are going to change, that we're never again going to be doing the same things that we had done in the past. And the result is today, almost 40 years later, Haier makes sophisticated products. They're the largest home appliance company in the world, and they're proud of their quality and justly, you'll see in a short while, very, very highly regarded in terms of sales and distinctive categories as well as home appliances. I would say they're a success. So what we've got is we've got a transformation that's notable because it's gone on for almost 40 years. It has not separated, every organization has to manage the present and the future. Most organizations separate that. They have people working on the present by being highly efficient, and they hopefully have R&D people creating the future being inefficient and proudly, right, inefficient. And what Haier has said is, we're not going to do that. Everybody's going to be in. This is not going to be a place where we have pilot groups and stuff like that. We're either going to do it together or not at all. And it's been bold. It's been bold throughout. So I think those are characteristics that are interesting. They've been explicitly, consciously, and deliberately experimental throughout this whole thing, well before people thought that was the way to go. And these are all attributes that are, you hardly ever see in complex old economy organizations. And it's worked, right? And it's worked. So for all of these reasons, I think Haier is a really interesting example. I've got to tell you, I don't know how many of you teach or who you're involved with in what you do, but if you teach in a business school, most of your executive participants come from old economy companies, and they're afraid of what's coming in the future. And Haier is a breath of fresh air because it's one of us, not one of them, and they can see growth. So what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is for this 40 years, they've experimented with their business models and their organizational culture. And the business models to be responsive to what's going on contextually around them in the marketplace, and then the culture to make sure that the business models can be accomplished, right? And so it's always been that 1-2 all the way along. In 1984, you saw the picture. It was, we're going to build great quality products and have a great brand. And we're going to start modestly by changing the measures and incentives that are part of our culture. By 1998, incidentally, with a lot of stuff in between, some of which worked and some of which didn't, 1998, we're now the largest domestic home appliance company in China. We're going to, operational excellence is no longer where we want to be exclusively. We also want to have great responsiveness. So we're going to become a company known for service. And they changed the structure of the organization to be able to operate more like a project organization than siloed divisions. And then in 2005, having withstood a market invasion by people like Whirlpool and Electrolux and all these foreign companies, they said, the only thing, we have one advantage that nobody else has. We're Chinese. Let's get closer to our customer than any of the foreign companies can. And they decided to pursue intimacy. And the cultural change to that was to redesign the organization into autonomous work units that were very competitive in the way they worked. So if you look at that 40 years, they've gone from a command and control pyramid. They flirted with a matrix organization. They flirted with SBUs. They turned the, you know, the pyramid upside down. And today they have an organization that's loosely defined boundaries and a lot of autonomy within the organization. 4,000 self-organizing autonomous work units literally doing the work of the organization. That's a lot of change. And one of the threads you'll see through this, if you're a fan of Agile, is that what Steve Law calls the 3 laws of Agile: small teams in order to harness entrepreneurial energies, customer experience as the goal, and networks, accessing unfamiliar expertise domains. You're going to see a lot of that in this because they've done that. But they have never been an explicitly agile company. And Qingdao is not Silicon Valley, right? So as Romina said, this is 70,000 people, much larger than your average startup. This is real. This is not kids running around in flip-flops, right? These are real people doing real things. And they're winning. They're winning in their marketplace. And their marketplace today is being hit by the Internet of Things so that the smart home of the future is here. And it's all about customer experiences more than anything else, which was not the way Hire built its success. So what are they, if I summarize what they're doing, they're building an organization where customer experience is more important than the solutions or boxes that they produce. And that means to accommodate that, they have to be more open and inclusive, both inside the organization and outside the organization. Of course, they're doing things they've never had to do before in areas they've never had any experience with before. You'll see this in a minute. They're pushing decision-making down so low that they no longer have a corporate strategy group, either in Qingdao or if you go to Louisville, Kentucky, visit General Electric Appliances, which they own, they don't have a strategy group there either anymore. The strategy is being made at the autonomous work unit level, not at the corporate level. And as a result, they can move faster and they're better informed by their customers because they don't have all the compliance issues that you would typically have in a large, big fat dinosaur organization. And they're acting, as a result, they're acting more like a startup than a conventional organization. So they have more people engaged, more energy, more life in the organization, more ideas. And that resonates with the network law that Steve talks about in his book, The Age of Agile. So for me, this is interesting. What it means is that Hire, which has traditionally produced boxes to keep your food cold and boxes to wash your clothing, they're still doing that because that's what they sell as a medium to earn compensation. But they realize that the customer is really interested in the dining experience that they enjoy at home every night, or the ability to dress appropriately. And their machines are part of that, but they're not enough. They're necessary, but not sufficient. So they are reconfiguring this to go beyond the machines and really be customer experience focused. As I mentioned earlier, they're also getting more in a non-exploitative fashion out of their workforce, energy, insights, experience of both their employees and their partners. So they're treating their employees, and I have employees and suppliers in quotes, because that was part of the problem. They're treating them really as, they're no longer treating them as a subservient group within a value chain or within a pyramid, but they're treating them as colleagues, not assets. They're allowing them a greater say in what they do and how they do it, and choosing who they partner with and how they wish to hire and fire, and how they share the results. These are really, in a very real sense, hire is more like an accelerator today than it is certainly not a bureaucracy by any stretch of the imagination. So from a leadership perspective, it's no longer I'm telling you what to do, but you tell me what you're going to do and I'll help you make it work or not, right? We're no longer going to scale by stretching our present divisions, departments, or organization, but we're going to scale by inviting you to leave those divisions and departments if you think there's a need and set up your own organization. And there's no corporate strategy office to tell you what to do anymore. So you're going to have to sort of figure out what's going on in the marketplace and run with it. We're going to create a portfolio of opportunities rather than a portfolio of projects or departments. And we're going to run a massive exploration exercise where running a small business is probably better for everybody than running a big one. The CEO of General Electric Appliances, Kevin Nolan, says he spends most of his time looking at things thinking, how can we make this smaller? How can we make the unit smaller? How can we get closer to the customer rather than how do we do it bigger? And they're doing this on a large scale by buying market leading firms, GE Appliances, for example, Sanyo Business in Japan, Fischer in New Zealand and South Pacific, Candy in Europe, and allowing them to interpret the hire approach in a way that suits their national cultures because everybody's different. And it works, right? So 12 consecutive year hires first in the world in global retail sales of home appliances. And you look for refrigerators, washing machines, freezers, wine cabinets, long list of things that they lead in worldwide. So is there any questions at this point, or since we have time, we have a small group, we can, we okay?
There was one in the chat there, Bill. It's what kind of boundaries does hire have?
Okay, so that's a great question, and let me get it. Let me forgive me. I'm not obsessed with my slides, but I want to give you a couple of examples. First of all, I want to talk about the three guiding principles that I think establish the unimportance of boundaries. And then I want to talk about an example, an illustration with details, so that we get to a point where we say, I don't know where the boundaries are in some cases any longer, and reflect on the fact that John Ray Min has told me that in 20 years, our most important asset might not be our physical plant and equipment or our people or our brands or intellectual property, but it might be the relationships we have with organizations outside of the higher group. So, so it's a complicated answer, right? I think it's an absolutely fascinating question, but I want to give you a little more detail. So forgive me. So look, there's these three guiding principles are really important because there's no common culture anymore in hire. I used to think for years that cultural alignment throughout an organization was important and it meant that everybody sort of behaved in the same way. I don't believe that anymore. I believe that cultural alignment is still important, but it has nothing to do with behaviors. It's all about beliefs. Common beliefs. What do our people believe in? And if everybody believes in the same thing, there's very much a cultural imprint that's higher, but it's expressed differently for different markets by different people doing different things. Okay. And the beliefs that drive higher, there's three of them. The first is we're going to create a great customer experience. It goes back to hammering those refrigerators 40 years ago. And this agrees also with Peter Drucker, right? The purpose of a business is to create and keep a customer. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create and keep a customer. Principle one, Principle two is that entrepreneurship is the best way to achieve this. Not a bureaucracy, not any organizational structure, but trusting entrepreneurs to do this. Again, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker said, you know, innovation is the work of knowing, not doing, and searching for change and responding to it as opportunities. John Ray Mann is a big Drucker fan, and I think you see this. He once gave a talk called Drucker Forever. About 20 years ago. He's always been a Drucker fan, and he's expressing it this way. And the third one, there's a picture of Chairman John. There's a third one is, if you ask people to be entrepreneurs and take chances, and you take your customers seriously as a part of a community, then the people who create the value come up with the new ideas, no matter who they are, partners, employees, customers, or to share in that value. The customers share in it usually because they get more value from the products and services they consume. The company gets it because it shares the value because they get the revenues that come forward. But you know what? The people who make the thing ought to have a direct link to the sharing. And so what he's put together is distributing value so that the value creators get a much larger piece of the value created than they would typically get in most organizations. So that becomes also part of the entrepreneurial energy. So if I think about what they've done, they've moved their organizational units closer to their customers, zero distance. By definition, that's beginning to erase those boundaries. In many cases, you see that higher middle managers own a portion of the retailers which are selling the products into the market. Now, you know, in many industries, many cultures, that would be considered a conflict of interest. But Benetton has been doing this for years, more than 40 years, because they want to have their retailers loving the customer as much as the people, you know, they want everybody focused on the customer, okay? So hires moving these, the closer to the customer, zero distance than anyone else. Everybody is supposed to be a sensor of market conditions, no matter what their role. Smaller units, we talked about this, specific market offerings. I'll talk about this in a minute. They've stopped trying to predict the unknown, and they're now trying to work with customer experience scenarios, very specific. So for example, one scenario might be a young married couple whose washing machine is on their balcony, which is not unusual in China. And that's going to be a different business than a young married couple whose washing machine is in a dedicated laundry space in the home, because their needs are going to be different and their lifestyles are going to be different. And so we're going to have people that focused with different business models and different cultures to support those business models. Everyone's supposed to be an entrepreneur. We talked about that. We are not going to separate the present from the future. If you're that close to the customer, you should be doing a great job in the present, but you should know where the future is going and be better able to respond than anybody else in the organization. So we expect you to continuously address both. And we're going to use spontaneity as an advantage. So we're going to invite our customers and our what used to be our vendors to become co-creators, and we're going to share profit with them as well. So let me give you an example. This is a typical Chinese New Year scene in a random train station somewhere in China. And this is 2019, the largest mass migration of people in the world. They're going home for Chinese New Year. There's a week off. Everybody goes home. Everybody goes home. There's a lot of people. And this picture is being replicated around the country. But in 2020, you couldn't do that because of the coronavirus, because of lockdowns in Chinese cities and prohibitions on traveling. So somebody in the community, I think it was a partner, said, hey, if we can't get people home for dinner, why not get dinner home for people? And so Hire and their partners began to contact chefs in the 9 distinctive food regions in China and said to them, can you create meals that we can replicate so that everybody in the family can produce the same meal, even though they're not together physically? And to do that, they employed chefs who were able to create recipes. Hires never created a recipe in its life. They hired chefs to create a recipe. They didn't hire them. They engaged them, and they videotaped those chefs so that everybody in a family could watch the chefs making the same meal at the same time, and thus be able to replicate what they were seeing together alone, if you will, right? Together at home. And if you've ever done this, you know it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because the ingredients aren't there and they're not in the right units, and I'm missing something. So Hire then went out and engaged ingredient providers to provide the ingredients that were exactly what the chefs were calling for, and packaging them. And then they got logistics producers who could get these products to homes all across China on time, affordable costs, and chef quality. And they did that. They did that effectively, so that in 2020, there were 20 dishes that were possible. They produced 120,000 New Year's Eve dinners, 168 cities, 20,000 families. Okay. This is not about refrigerators any longer.
Right.
This is about surprising your customers and your competitors by being smarter, faster, more creative, and more graceful than anybody in the industry before. The refrigerators matter because Hire's the touch point. Hire's got the video screen on the refrigerator. Hire's storing the product. Hire's mobilizing everybody. But everybody comes with new ideas and different ideas. So everybody shares accordingly in the profits generated. This is not a fee-for-service command and control value chain. This is a partnership of co-creators. And it worked. So what is Rendon Hui? And then I'm going to stop. What is Rendon Hui? It's getting so close to the customer that you know before they do what they want in the customer experience. It's zero distance. It's relying on small micro enterprises to be entrepreneurial, faster, more responsive, and regarding your employees as entrepreneurs to power all of this and rewarding them accordingly. And finally, recognizing co-creation is the best way to access unfamiliar expertise domains. Hires never put ingredients together. It's never written recipes. It's never written video scripts. It's never shipped these sorts of foodstuffs into people's homes. All of this stuff requires different expertise. And you can do that in a command and control value chain, or you can invite people to come in and share their ideas. I gotta believe by inviting them to come in and sharing their ideas, they'll come back again and again and again.